Mbote, Abari, Assalamu alaikum, bonjour, welcome to Henrythejedi.com.
Now let's work on the side view, because now we really need to position the eye properly according to the shape of the head, of course. Let's change the view here from the left, make it the right viewport, so that of course we now have the proper view to work from. And then please watch carefully. We are first going to move the eye backwards as you can see, so that it sits inside the holder. And then we are going to select the vertices mode. Now of course, as you can see, we are going to select the back vertices, those towards the back of the tube. And now they need to come all the way backwards like that. Okay. So now of course, as you can see, they will be sitting inside, as you can see. Okay. Yeah, you can see there. You know what? In order to give our eye more mobility, I think let's move it like this, as this space will be taken up by another eye. So yeah, I'm reducing the length so that we can be able to move this eye back and forth in the future. Up next, I like this particular element here. I think it enables the camera to control the zooming. So let's try and have such a structure with our eye. To do that, first we need to position the eye in the middle of the scene. So we're going to select the move tool, and then we're going to of course move each of these values here to 0 units on the x-axis. In this way, as you can see, the eye is moved downwards. Okay, don't worry, we will bring it back up. Up next, we're going to create a box. Yeah, just a box like that. And then let's see, select the moving tool again, and of course move it to 0 units on all axes. And now I'm going to press F3 so that we can see through. Now let's move it so that it sits above the ring of the eye. And then let's make our eye an editable polygon. Select the vertices tool, and then we're going to select the upper vertices, and we are simply going to scale them down, as you can see. And then we're going to move it inwards or downwards, as you can see, and let's just scale it down a bit more. And those of course don't need to be so elevated. So as you can see, the main idea is for these vertices here to be sitting inside the eyelid or the eye holder. Okay. And of course, at this point we can see that they're way too far at the back, so we need to move this box here forward somewhere there. Yeah, like that. Okay. Remember, the main idea is that it should be positioned at 0 units on this axis. Yeah, it's at 0 units on the x-axis. I think we just want to scale it more down. Okay. And then here comes a very important part. We need to duplicate this object all around the eye. Now that will be made possible by using 3D Max's very powerful tool called the array tool. However, the array tool will not work well unless we position the pivot point of our object in the right place. So first things first, we go to the hierarchy panel of the box and then select affect pivot only, and then we're going to select the moving tool, and then we come in here in these boxes, and then we're going to turn each of these values here to 0. And by doing that, as you can see now, the pivot point of the box is sitting right in the center of the eye. Why? Because the eye needs to be duplicated along the radius of the eye. Okay, so the main point was to adjust the pivot point and move everything to 0. Okay, and then we can actually unclick that box, and now we're going to go to tools, array. First things first, we want to make sure that we click on the preview button so that we can see what we're doing. And then of course we need to rotate our object, and now let me show you guys. If I begin to increase the number of the rotation on the Z axis, you'll notice, just like that, of course, the object begins to duplicate itself. So that's the power of the array tool. Now, in order for us to have a perfect replication all over, we are going to enter the fact that we want a rotation of 360 degrees along the Z axis. Okay? Of course, they are two spread apart, so we're going to increase the number of duplicates here. I think 44 is a good number. And of course, please make sure that it's an instance. Okay? And then hit OK. By doing that, as you can see now, we've managed to duplicate our structure all over, so that now we have that nice ring around the eye. Okay? Now preferably these little guys need to have a material texture of their own. So first things first, we're going to select the eye holder, and then you're going to attach, click on the attach button there, this little button there, so that now we're going to select all the boxes that we've created. Actually before we attach all the boxes, let's select actually all the boxes from the scene. Okay, select them, there are 44 of them. Open up the material editor, select an empty slot, and call it the zoom finder. Okay, so that's the texture for zoom finder, and we are simply going to make it some kind of a brownish texture for now. Okay, and of course assign it to our object. And now we're going to select our eye holder, attach, and then of course now we're going to attach all the boxes, 44 of them, and then hit attach, and of course make sure the material IDs match the materials. Now you notice, of course, they are one thing with the eye. Okay, and then I also like this ring here, this red band here on the object. So to recreate that quickly, we are simply going to the create panel, and then we'll select under shapes, we're going to select a circle. Let's throw the circle in the viewport like that. Click on the align tool, and of course we need to align it to the eye holder, okay, on the X, Y, and Z axis, so that it's sitting perfectly in the middle, as you can see. Let's just scale it up a bit and move it to the front. And then we need to give it some thickness, so we're going to add, let's see, our shell modifier. Okay, just increase the amount a bit of the shell. And then now of course we need to scale it down so that it fits perfectly with the object. You can see where it is right now. It's sitting like a rubber band. Select the circle, and then we're going to go to interpolation just to adjust the roundedness. So just increase the number of steps to maybe 16. Okay. And then open up the material editor, and we just want to give it a red rubber band texture. So select an empty slot there, just rename it to red rubber. Give it a texture, and of course must be a nice striking red texture like that. Okay, and then of course it needs to be sitting at the right position, but first we're going to right click and then collapse it, because you don't want these inner meshes, or else are going to be in the way of our eye. Okay, so let's make it an editable polygon. Of course, select the polygon mode, and then we're going to select this polygon here. Let's see, can we delete that? Yes, we can. And select also the inner one, delete it also, because it's going to block the way of our eye. And then we're going to select the border mode. We select that border and that one, and then select the scaling tool, and then we're simply going to hold down the shift button and then drag inwards, as you can see. Okay, just to finish up its shape inwards. Okay, and then of course we need to attach this red rubber band to the eye object. Okay, yeah, so now you can see of course which piece of geometry we have. Okay, and then also select the eye holder, and then we're simply going to add a smooth modifier to it. Turn on auto smooth. That just helps to complete the smoothing of our object, and then let's collapse it again. Okay, yeah, we are now ready to move our eye back to where it was. So simply select the eye, the eye holder that is, and of course move it where it was before. It's going to take its proper position. Yeah, like that. And of course now we are going to edit, clone, make a copy of it. Okay, of course now this will be the bigger one. It's going to be sitting inside the bigger part of the skull of the robot. Now this guy here needs to be quite much bigger, so we are scaling it much bigger. And also it needs to be sitting behind, as you can see, behind the primary eye. So go ahead and move it accordingly. We're going to select the vertices mode, and again press F3 so that we only select those vertices at the back, and simply move them, of course, backwards, as you can see. So you can see more or less already the shape of things. Now it needs, this eye really needs to be much bigger. That's why you can see how I'm adjusting mine, and perhaps also lower. Let's be careful, of course, to make sure that the eye does not enter the geometry of the head there. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. So that's why you can see I'm moving mine downwards and forward. Okay, so let's just analyze the scene at this point. Yeah, you can see what we are having there. Alright, and I think the primary eye can be made bigger, as long as it can fit into the socket that's designed for it. Oh yeah, so you can see of course what we are having. Okay, and now we need to make use of the material editor so that we can already begin to group the right materials in the right places. I'm going to turn off the edge faces for now. We're going to select any of these empty slots here, and then we're going to pick the material, and let's start by picking the eye holder number 1. As you can see now, of course it contains all the materials that's coming from the eye holder. Let's just change the color of the eye for now, maybe to something bluish, so that we know what we are dealing with. So let's just rename this material here to eye holder 1. Sorry, just eye holder. Just rename it. Okay, and then, which means of course we can go ahead and select any of these now. Before we actually delete some things, let's go and select the next slot, and then we're going to pick the materials coming from eye holder 01, which is the secondary eye holder, the one behind there. And then of course now we can go ahead and delete any of these from the material editor slot, so that we can of course use them whenever we feel like, for other purposes, because really right now we don't need them to occupy spaces, because the materials of course being contained inside here. So in here you're going to notice here for the eye, we can rename this material layer to eye secondary, and hopefully no, okay, let's do the following. Okay, let's do the following. We're going to select the eye holder, first one, click on this material here of the eye holder, and then we're going to assign it the material, and we are going to decide to replace the material. Okay, and then let's select eye holder 01, which is a secondary eye, rename the material here to eye holder 01, and of course assign it this texture, so that now of course we can be able to adjust the color of this particular eye, as you can see. Now of course, as you can see for ourselves, it's taking on a different color, so that way of course we can now be able to determine the different colors of each eye. Of course that means it's really time to duplicate things. So select the eye, I'm going to select the affect pivot only option, and then of course we need to move the pivot points to 0 units on the x-axis. As you can see now, it's sitting in the middle. And then we are going to go to tools, because before we duplicate anything we want to make sure that it will duplicate properly. So we go to tools, reset X form, and then reset selected, and then we're going to collapse our object, of course. And of course we're going to add our beloved mirror modifier. Make it of course a copy on the x-axis, and just like that we of course have two eyes. Okay, and then of course we can collapse that, then select this one also, affect pivot only, and then we're going to move the pivot point to 0 units on the x-axis, go to tools, and let's reset it, and of course let's collapse our object, and we are going to add the mirror effect again, of course a copy again, and collapse these to make them one thing. Okay, so that at this point of course, as you can see, both eyes have been positioned accordingly. Now it is now time to give our robot some armament, in other words a machine gun, so that it can kill all those baddies, you know. But if you check well, every aeroplane or every bomber aircraft or any armored vehicle always has a compartment to hold the weaponry. So in other words, okay, I know about that because I'm so much inspired by the military and the way they do things. It's just so interesting. So what we need to do is create a compartment to hold our weaponry. We're going to use lines. Let's go to the front viewport. Make sure of course you turn on auto grid. So we're going to create a line that starts by bending, as you can see, and then it's going to simply go upwards like that, and then right click to finish off the cut, and then we're going to go to the modify panel. Now what is the most important thing here is that the space in here will determine just how big is a weapon that this robot of ours can carry. But before that, let's just make sure that this side here will be closed off, and also select this option, this section here. We just want to create a bigger gap or a bigger curve there, as you can see. Then select the moving tool, and we want to position it at 0 units on the x-axis, so that of course it's sitting perfectly in the middle. And then of course we're going to add an extrude modifier. Increase the number of, or rather decrease the number of the amount, and of course at this point already you want to move this into the proper position. Let's move it so that it can be behind the eyes a bit like that, and of course let's continue with our extrusion so that it really goes all the way back. Okay, you can see what shape we are dealing with. Okay, and of course let's go to the line itself, go to the rendering, go to the interpolation. We just want to make it a bit of a smoother shape, so we're simply going to add a number of steps. Okay, maybe to 14. or 15. Okay, just to make it a smoother shape, as you can see. And now, since it's still extruded, we're going to increase the number of segments to something a bit higher, as you can see, maybe 5. Okay, and then we're going to add an FFD 4x4x4 modifier. Click on the control point, and let's go towards the back. Yeah, towards the back, that section there. Now here, let's scale things down and scale them, of course, back into position again. In fact, let me zoom in. Yeah, you can see what we're doing there. We're simply scaling things accordingly. Now, of course, the ones here in the middle can be stretched out a bit, okay, to create that nice look and feel of a shell. And of course, according to this viewport here, these guys here need to come a bit more up. These need to come out a bit more also. Okay. At the front here, okay, in fact, let's leave the front alone. Instead, let's work on the vertices here in the middle. Yeah, we can bring them down, as you can see. But not too much, eh? So basically, this is the shape that we have so far on the overall. I think these control points here on the sides need to be brought back in. Yeah, it's much better like that. So you can see what we're dealing with. Yeah, and then of course we can right click and then collapse the structure. Right click and make it a double polygon. So you can see what we're having. And since this is one of those structures that people will hardly get to see, that's why we are not adding too many unnecessary polygons. So select this edge and loop it. Maybe this one we want to chamfer it outwards. Okay, just to create a more or less even flow of lines. That one also. Loop and chamfer. Not too much. Okay. Loop, chamfer. Yeah, okay. And then we're about to duplicate it, of course, but before we can do that, we're going to select the vertices mode, sorry, the edge mode. Select these edges here that run along that section and then loop them. Of course, we want to make them straight all the way to the end. So with them selected, we are going to make them planar on the x-axis like that. Then of course select the moving tool, and then we need to move them to 0 units on the x-axis. Okay, and now of course we're going to select the hierarchy panel, affect pivot only, and then we need to move the pivot point to 0 units on the x-axis. As you can see now, the pivot point is sitting right there in the middle of the x-axis. And of course we're going to mirror our object, make it a copy. Yeah, so that at this point, of course, we can see for ourselves exactly what we've managed to do. Okay, and it's a bit too flat, so first things first, we're going to add a shell modifier, of course, to give it some meaty structure, as you can see. Turn off the edge faces so that we can just see what is going on. Yeah, and I think that's fine, really. We might want to add a smooth modifier. Just increase the threshold and collapse the structure again. Yeah, it's looking quite good, I must say, indeed. Okay, Now it will also need to take the texture of the carbon fiber, so open up the material editor and let's see where's carbon fiber. Select the carbon fiber material and of course assign it to our object. So basically you can say its structure beautifully. Okay. Okay, so now let's get ready and get armed. Let's be brothers in arms. So here's how we're going to create the machine guns. There are many ways to model anything in 3D Max, and my aim is always to show you the most effective way to get results. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the front viewport, go to shapes, create panel, and then shapes, and then we're going to create a circle. And of course we're going to draw the circle in the viewport. Now select the moving tool, and then we're going to position it, of course, as usual, to exactly the middle of the scene. And then let's go to the modify panel, and then we need to reduce the number of steps quite a bit, maybe to, let's see, yeah, to 9 steps, or even, yeah, 9 steps, that's enough. Okay. And then we are going to need to make duplicates of this very same circle. So we go to edit, clone, just make it a copy and then click OK. And then we're going to select the scaling tool and simply scale this little guy here down. Okay, I'm going to change its color so that you guys can see, as well as this ones. Okay, so select this little guy here, and then now it's so tiny because I'll need to make up the parts of the cylinders that shoot from. So we can simply reduce the number of the segments, maybe to 5. Okay, remember our aim is always, if an object is not really going to do much work, we simply reduce the number of the polygons. Okay, yeah, let's move on. We are then going to move this guy here towards this edge of the gun barrel. And then again, as we did with the array tool before, let's go to the hierarchy panel and select affect pivot only, and of course now we're going to move the pivot point to 0 units on every axis. As you can see, again we're going to be very smart. We go to tools, array, click on preview, and of course again we are rotating them at 360 degrees on the Z axis, but now we don't want 44 polygons, we only want, let's see, yeah, we just want 6 of them. Okay, and then hit OK, of course, so that now you can see how beautifully they become duplicated. Then we're going to select this the main circle again, then we're going to shift and drag downwards so that it's going to make up that center polygon. Okay, and then up next we are going to right click on this particular circle in the center there, and then turn it into an editable spline so that we can be able to access its properties. Now of course we need to attach the rest of the splines, so we're going to click on attach, and then of course begin to pick up each of these splines here, as you can see in your screens. Okay, so that now of course they're all part of this object of ours. And now all is left is the magic of extrusion, so we're going to add the extrude modifier. Reduce the number of segments to 1, and simply let's extrude them, of course, forward, as you can see. Okay, beautiful, eh? Let me see, is there a way for us to go back? Let's see. Simply click on the editable spline, and then we're going to go to the interpolation option. Let's see, try to decrease the number of steps. Yes, it's working. We can actually decrease the number of steps. Instead of 9, we can actually have just 5 steps. You see, the barrels still look alright. Okay, and then we're going to select this one that we left there, and let's have, for it we're going to have also an extrude modifier, as you can see. Just reduce a bit. Okay, yep, you can see for yourselves, of course, we are getting the shape of the gun barrel. Now I'm sure, very sure, that this is actually the final model that we want of this object. So we're going to right click and then collapse it at first. Call it machine gun. Oh yeah. Then let's select our barrels again. We just want to make sure that they're long enough, so we're going to simply increase the extrude amount, as you can see. Let's select the machine gun again. I call mine machine gun. Anyways, we're going to shift, actually first make it an editable polygon, and then shift and drag forward, make it, let's see, 3 copies. Okay, we're going to select this one here, and we simply want to squash down the polygons here, and they should be closer to the ones at the beginning. In fact, let's select this guy and attach the rest of these polygons to it. Okay, because after all they are still the same object. Back to vertices mode, and I think this one here, this needs to be scaled down a bit more. Select those ones also and move them, of course, to be much closer, as you can see. Okay, now the beginning here, they need to be closer up, and then we're going to shift and drag again to make another copy. Yeah, so that there are 3 at the front there. Yep. So you can see how cool looking this is indeed. This is quite interesting, I must say. And then here at the front, we're going to add an editable poly modifier to our barrels. Editable poly, and then we're going to select the polygon mode, select these polygons here, and we are going to insert them. Just increase the number of the insert, as you can see. Okay. And now those, we're going to click on the extrude modifier or extrude option there, and then simply extrude them backwards, as you can see. Okay, very good. So now you'll notice, of course, it seems as if the barrels are open at the front. Yeah, just the way we want it. And then also we're simply going to add a smooth modifier to it. Not mesh smooth or turbo smooth, simply smooth, and then turn on auto smooth, and just like that we can see, of course, it has done exactly what we wanted it to do.